The Saturday morning flight from Las Vegas to Boston was filling up with weekend travelers when 6-year-old Emma Martinez boarded with her mother, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny and a small backpack covered in cartoon characters. Emma was excited. Her first airplane ride ever, going to visit her grandmother in Boston for 2 weeks of summer vacation. Her mother, Carmen Martinez, settled Emma into the window seat of row 12A, and took the middle seat herself. The aisle seat remained empty for now. Emma pressed her nose against the window, watching luggage being loaded, fascinated by the ground crew vehicles moving around the plane. Everything was magical, wonderful, an adventure. Neither Emma nor her mother knew that beneath their seats, hidden in shadows where no one could see it, was a package that would turn their flight into a race against time. Flight attendant Rachel Morrison greeted passengers as they boarded. Her warm smile genuine after 12 years of flying. She loved her job, loved the variety, the travel, meeting people from all walks of life. Today seemed like a routine flight, full plane, mix of families and business travelers, nothing unusual. Rachel helped passengers find overhead space, answered questions about arrival times, worked through her pre-flight routine with practiced ease. She noticed the little girl in 12A, excited and chatty, and made a mental note to bring her wings pin later. Kids on their first flights deserved the special treatment. Aaron settled into seat 15C, 3 rows behind Emma and her mother. He pulled out his laptop, preparing to work on an article during the 5-hour flight. The businessman next to him was already on his phone, squeezing in last-minute calls before they'd have to switch to airplane mode. The cabin filled with typical departure sounds, conversations, luggage zipping, flight attendants making announcements. Everything routine, normal, safe. Aaron had flown this route dozens of times. He expected nothing but several hours of work, followed by landing in Boston. He had no idea that in 45 minutes a child's dropped toy would reveal a threat that could kill everyone aboard. But here's what nobody knew. 3 rows ahead, in the overhead bin above row 9, a passenger had placed a small black backpack. That passenger, a man named David Sullivan, traveling alone in seat 9C, had checked in normally, passed through security, boarded without incident. But David Sullivan wasn't a normal passenger. He was a domestic terrorist, radicalized online over the past year, convinced that an attack on commercial aviation would send a message to the government he hated. The backpack in the overhead bin contained an improvised explosive device, C4 plastic explosive wired to a timer and cell phone trigger. David had planned every detail carefully. The bomb would detonate 2 hours into the flight, over the heartland of America, killing everyone aboard and sending debris raining down on whatever town was unlucky enough to be below. In David's twisted mind, this was justice. This was revolution. The plane pushed back on schedule. Emma bounced in her seat with excitement, pointing out everything to her mother. "Look, Mama, we're moving. Are we flying yet?" Carmen smiled, enjoying her daughter's innocent joy despite her own nervousness about flying. "Not yet, mi amor. We have to get to the runway first." Emma nodded seriously, clutching her bunny tighter as the plane taxied. In seat 9C, David Sullivan sat calmly, reading a magazine, looking like any other passenger. But his heart raced with anticipation and fear. 2 hours. In 2 hours he'd be a martyr. His name would be remembered. His message would be delivered in fire and death. Rachel completed her safety demonstration and strapped into her jump seat for takeoff. The plane accelerated down the runway, and Emma squealed with delight as the nose lifted and they climbed into the bright Las Vegas sky. Her first time leaving the ground, her first time seeing the world from above. She pressed against the window, watching buildings shrink to toy size, watching the desert spread out below them in browns and tans. "Mama, look, we're really flying. We're in the sky." Carmen kissed the top of her daughter's head, grateful for this moment of pure childhood wonder. The flight reached cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign turned off. Rachel and her colleagues began beverage service, moving through the cabin with their carts. David Sullivan declined beverages, keeping his magazine up to partially hide his face. He checked his watch obsessively. 1 hour and 43 minutes until detonation. He'd set the timer for 2 hours after takeoff to ensure they were over land when it exploded, maximizing the shock value of debris falling from the sky. The cell phone trigger was backup, in case he needed to detonate early. He kept the phone in his pocket, finger ready to hit the trigger button if anything went wrong with the timer. About 45 minutes into the flight, Emma got bored. She'd colored in her coloring book, eaten her snack, looked out the window until there was nothing new to see. She pulled out her favorite small toy from her backpack, a little plastic figurine from a movie she loved. She played with it on her tray table, making it jump and fly through the air. Then, inevitably, she dropped it. The small toy fell between her feet, bounced once, and rolled under the seat in front of her, into the shadows beneath row 11. "Mama, I dropped my toy," Emma said, leaning forward to look for it. Carmen unbuckled to help her search. "Stay in your seat, baby, I'll get it." Carmen leaned down, reaching under the seat in front of them, feeling around on the floor. Her hand brushed something unexpected, not the small plastic toy, but something larger, harder, unfamiliar. She pulled her hand back and looked down with confusion. Under the seat in front of them, partially hidden in shadow, was a black backpack that definitely wasn't theirs. Wait, this is where everything changed. Carmen frowned. Had the passenger in 11A left their bag under the seat? That seemed odd. Overhead bins were for carry-ons, not under seats, unless it was a small personal item. And this backpack was too large to be a personal item. It should have been in the overhead. Carmen's curiosity got the better of her. She reached further under the seat, grabbed the backpack strap, and pulled it slightly forward into better light so she could see it. That's when she noticed the wires. Wires running from inside the backpack to what looked like a phone taped to the outside. Carmen's blood went cold. She'd seen enough news coverage of terrorist attacks to recognize what this might be. With shaking hands, she pressed the call button above her seat frantically, again and again. Rachel was 3 rows back with the beverage cart. She saw the call light from 12A flashing urgently and made her way forward. "Yes, ma'am, what can I help you with?" Rachel's professional smile faded when she saw Carmen's pale face and shaking hands. "There's a bag under the seat in front of us," Carmen whispered, trying not to panic, trying not to scare Emma, who was still looking for her dropped toy. "It has wires and a phone attached to it. I think it might be a bomb." Rachel's training kicked in immediately. "Don't panic. Assess the situation. Follow protocol." She knelt down and looked under the seat where Carmen was pointing. There it was, a black backpack. Wires clearly visible running from inside to a phone taped on the outside. Rachel's stomach dropped to her feet. This was real. This was actually happening. Rachel stood slowly, her mind racing. "Stay calm. Don't touch it again. I'm going to alert the captain." She walked quickly but calmly to the cockpit, not wanting to cause panic in the cabin. She knocked with the emergency pattern. Captain Michael Torres opened the door slightly. "We have a situation," Rachel said quietly. "A passenger found what appears to be an IED under a seat. Wires, phone trigger, the whole thing." Row 11. Michael's face went white. He immediately radioed air traffic control while his co-pilot, Sarah Kim, began emergency procedures. "This is Flight 638. We have a suspected explosive device on board. Declaring emergency. Requesting immediate vectors to nearest airport and bomb disposal team on arrival." You won't believe what happened in the next 30 seconds. Air traffic control responded instantly, clearing all airspace around Flight 638, directing them toward a military airfield in Utah, the nearest suitable airport for this type of emergency. Fighter jets were scrambled to escort them. Bomb disposal teams and FBI tactical units were mobilized. In the cabin, Rachel gathered her fellow flight attendants and explained the situation in whispered urgency. They needed to identify who the backpack belonged to without tipping that person off that the device had been discovered. If the bomber realized they knew, he might detonate immediately. Rachel returned to row 12, kneeling beside Carmen and little Emma. "Ma'am, I need you to stay very calm and quiet. We've alerted the captain, we're going to handle this. But I need you to do exactly what I say. First, pick up your daughter's toy from under the seat. Carefully, don't disturb the backpack. Then I need you and Emma to move to different seats toward the back of the plane. Can you do that quietly without drawing attention?" Carmen nodded, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unbuckle Emma's seatbelt. Emma, sensing something was wrong, looked at her mother with wide eyes. "Mama, what's happening? Why are you scared?" Carmen forced a smile. "Nothing, baby. We're just going to move to different seats so you can see better out the window. Come on." She picked up Emma, grabbed their bags, and followed Rachel toward the back of the plane. Other passengers barely noticed, assuming it was just a routine seat change. Carmen and Emma settled into empty seats in row 28, and Rachel quietly explained to nearby passengers to remain calm, stay seated, and not discuss what was happening. Now Rachel faced the harder task, identifying the owner of the bomb without alerting him. She and her colleagues casually walked through the cabin, asking passengers if they'd placed bags under seats that weren't theirs, claiming they were trying to reunite lost items with owners. Most passengers said no. They reached row 9. 3 passengers, 2 women, and 1 man. Rachel's pulse hammered as she smiled casually. "Excuse me, folks, did any of you happen to place a black backpack under the seat in row 11? We're trying to find the owner." The 2 women shook their heads. The man, David Sullivan, didn't even look up from his magazine. "Nope, not mine," Rachel's instincts screamed. This man's lack of interest, his too casual demeanor, the way he deliberately didn't make eye contact, every signal pointed to guilt. She moved past him and radioed the captain. "I believe the suspect is in 9C, male passenger, 30s, brown hair, wearing a gray sweater." He denied owning the bag, but his body language suggests deception. Michael acknowledged. "Copy. FBI wants us to keep him unaware until we land. Can you do that?" Rachel took a deep breath. "Affirmative. He doesn't suspect anything yet." The next 40 minutes were the longest of Rachel's life. She had to maintain normal service, keep the suspect from becoming suspicious, prevent panic among passengers, all while knowing there was a bomb under a seat that could detonate at any moment. She smiled, served beverages, chatted with passengers, all with a terror ball in her stomach. In the cockpit, Michael pushed the aircraft to maximum safe speed, descending toward the Utah military base where emergency teams waited. Every second counted. They didn't know if the bomb had a timer, a remote trigger, or both. They didn't know what would set it off. They just knew they needed to get on the ground now. Aaron noticed increased tension among the flight crew, but couldn't identify why. They were moving through the cabin more urgently, whispering to each other with serious faces. Something was happening, but passengers hadn't been told what. He continued working on his laptop, unaware that 3 rows ahead, a bomb sat beneath a seat, and several rows behind him, a little girl and her mother sat in relocated seats, the mother trying desperately not to cry and scare her daughter, knowing what she'd discovered, knowing how close to death they all were. The plane began descending more steeply than normal. Captain Torres came on the intercom, his voice carefully controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a mechanical issue, we're making an unscheduled landing at a military airfield in Utah. This is purely precautionary. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing." The vagueness of the announcement confused passengers, but most accepted it. A mechanical issue. Precautionary landing. Routine stuff. Nobody panicked. Nobody except Carmen Martinez, who clutched Emma tighter and prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. David Sullivan checked his watch. The timer should detonate in 50 minutes. But they were descending. Landing somewhere that wasn't Boston. Had something gone wrong? Had someone discovered the device? He pulled out his phone, the one connected to the bomb's backup trigger. His thumb hovered over the detonation button. Should he trigger it now, while they were still in the air? Or wait, see if this was just a routine diversion? He didn't want to waste his martyrdom on uncertainty. He decided to wait. If they landed and people started evacuating, if he sensed discovery, he'd trigger it then. The military base appeared ahead, its long runways surrounded by empty desert. Emergency vehicles lined the runway. Fire trucks, ambulances, armored cars from the bomb disposal unit. FBI tactical teams positioned themselves around the airfield. This was a full-scale emergency response, though passengers on the plane didn't know it. Rachel and her colleagues strapped into jump seats. Rachel positioned where she could watch David Sullivan. He looked nervous now, checking his watch repeatedly, clutching his phone. Rachel's heart hammered. He was going to detonate. She could feel it. The moment they stopped, he'd push that button. The plane touched down smoothly and began decelerating. David's hand tightened on his phone. His thumb moved toward the button. Rachel saw it happening and made a split-second decision. She unbuckled while the plane was still moving against all safety protocols and rushed toward row 9. "Sir, I need your phone immediately. FAA regulations require all electronic devices to be off during landing." She grabbed for his phone before he could react. David jerked away, standing up, pushing her back. "Get away from me." His shout drew everyone's attention. Passengers turned to look. That's when David realized they knew. Somehow they'd discovered the bomb. His cover was blown. He raised the phone high. "Everyone stay back or I detonate. I have a bomb on this plane. I'll kill everyone." Passengers screamed. Panic erupted. People tried to unbuckle and run toward exits, but the plane was still moving. In row 28, Carmen threw her body over Emma, shielding her daughter. Aaron dove under his seat. Everyone thought they were about to die. But Rachel didn't hesitate. She grabbed David's wrist, fighting for the phone. David was stronger, shoving her into the seats, but Rachel held on desperately. "Someone help me." 2 male passengers jumped up, grabbing David from behind, wrestling him down. One of them, a military veteran, recognized the situation immediately and applied a chokehold. "Drop the phone or I choke you out." David struggled, his thumb still reaching for the button. The veteran tightened his grip. David's vision began to tunnel, his hand weakened. The veteran's partner grabbed the phone from David's hand and threw it toward Rachel. She caught it and immediately ran toward the front of the plane, getting the phone as far from the bomb as possible. The plane finally stopped. The doors burst open. FBI tactical agents stormed in, weapons drawn. "Everyone stay seated, hands where we can see them." They moved straight to David Sullivan, who was pinned to the floor by passengers, barely conscious from the chokehold. Agents cuffed him and dragged him off the plane. Bomb disposal technicians in protective gear entered carefully, moving toward row 11. Rachel pointed to the backpack under the seat. The techs carefully extracted it and moved it off the aircraft using remote-controlled equipment. Passengers were evacuated quickly, sliding down emergency chutes onto the tarmac where they were moved a safe distance away. Emma clung to her mother, crying and confused. Carmen held her tight, her own tears flowing. They'd survived. Somehow, by the grace of God and a dropped toy, they'd survived. Aaron stood on the desert tarmac with other passengers, his hands shaking, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. A bomb. There had been an actual bomb on the plane. they'd come within seconds of detonation. The bomb disposal team carefully examined the device in a controlled area far from the aircraft. They confirmed it was a functioning IED with enough C4 to destroy the aircraft and kill everyone aboard. The timer still showed 38 minutes until detonation. If the plane hadn't diverted, if the bomb hadn't been discovered, if David Sullivan hadn't been stopped from triggering it manually, everyone would have been dead in half an hour. The margin between life and death had been measured in a 6-year-old girl's dropped toy and a mother's curiosity about a backpack that shouldn't have been there. The FBI investigation revealed David Sullivan's entire plan. His radicalization process, documented in online forums. His acquisition of explosives through connections in the extremist community. His selection of Flight 638 specifically because it was a cross-country flight that would be overpopulated areas when the bomb detonated, maximizing casualties and media impact. His detailed timeline and notes about martyrdom. David had planned to kill everyone aboard and terrorize the nation. But he'd failed. Because a little girl dropped a toy. Emma Martinez became an unlikely hero, though she didn't understand why. She'd just dropped her toy. She'd just been a kid being clumsy. But that simple childhood accident had led her mother to discover the bomb that saved everyone. The FBI interviewed Emma gently, and she told them about dropping her toy, about her mama finding the scary bag, about moving seats and being confused. She still didn't understand what she'd prevented. She was 6. She just wanted to get to Grandma's house and play. But Carmen Martinez understood completely. She'd touched the backpack that could have exploded at any moment. She'd seen the wires, recognized the danger, made the split-second decision to alert the flight crew rather than ignore it or assume it was harmless. That decision saved every life on that plane. At the FBI press conference, Carmen was asked what had made her investigate the backpack. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Something felt wrong about it being there. And I've learned to trust when something feels wrong. So I looked closer, and I'm so grateful I did." Rachel Morrison received commendations from the airline, the FBI, and the FAA for her handling of the emergency. She'd kept calm, followed protocol, prevented panic, and physically fought a terrorist for the phone trigger. "I just did my job," Rachel insisted when called a hero. Carmen Martinez is the real hero. She found the bomb. I just responded to her alert. But the FBI disagreed. "Both of you are heroes." Mrs. Martinez discovered the threat. Mrs. Morrison managed the crisis perfectly and prevented detonation. Every life saved is because you both did exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. Aaron's article about the incident, titled "The Toy That Saved Flight 638, became one of the most widely read stories of the year. It detailed the chain of small events. Emma's dropped toy, Carmen's curiosity, Rachel's calm response, the passengers who subdued David Sullivan, that combined to prevent mass murder. "Terrorism is defeated not by grand gestures, but by ordinary people paying attention," Aaron wrote. A mother who investigated something that seemed wrong, a flight attendant who believed her and acted immediately, passengers who fought a bomber when needed. These are the heroes who save us. Not soldiers or agents necessarily, but ordinary people who see something and say something and act when action is needed. David Sullivan was convicted on 17 counts of terrorism, attempted murder, and weapons violations. At sentencing, the judge addressed him directly. "You plan to murder 183 innocent people to make a political statement. You built a bomb designed to blow an aircraft out of the sky. You would have succeeded except for one thing. A 6-year-old girl dropped a toy, and her mother paid attention. Your evil was defeated by childhood innocence and maternal vigilance. You will spend the rest of your life in federal prison contemplating your failure. This sentence is life without possibility of parole." David showed no remorse, further cementing the righteousness of the life sentence. 2 years after the incident, Emma Martinez was old enough to understand what had happened. Carmen had waited, not wanting to traumatize her daughter too young, but finally felt Emma could handle the truth. She explained gently about the bad man, about the bomb, about how dropping her toy had led to finding it. Emma listened with wide eyes. "So I'm a hero?" Carmen hugged her. "You're my hero. You'll always be my hero. You dropped your toy and saved Mama and yourself and everyone on the plane." Emma thought about this seriously. "So it's okay to be clumsy sometimes?" Carmen laughed through tears. "Yes, baby. Sometimes being clumsy saves lives." The airline created a new protocol after Flight 638. All backpacks or bags found in unusual locations during flights would be reported immediately and investigated before landing. Flight attendants were trained to look for unattended bags not just in overhead bins but under seats, in lavatories, anywhere suspicious items might be hidden. The TSA enhanced screening procedures for carry-on items. David Sullivan's near-successful attack exposed vulnerabilities in the system, but it also showed how alert passengers and crew could prevent disaster. Every enhancement to security protocols was a direct result of lessons learned from Flight 638. 5 years after the incident, Rachel organized a reunion of Flight 638 passengers and crew. Over 100 people attended, gathering to commemorate the day they'd almost died but didn't. Emma, now 11 years old and understanding the full significance, was the guest of honor. She stood before the group and spoke with a maturity beyond her years. I used to be embarrassed about dropping things. I'm clumsy. I drop stuff all the time, but I learned that my clumsiness saved everyone on our plane. It taught me that even accidents can have purpose. Even mistakes can lead to good things. I dropped my toy and my mama found a bomb. That's not luck. That's God working through clumsy kids. The laughter and applause were cathartic, releasing years of tension. Carmen spoke next, emotional but composed. I almost didn't investigate that backpack. I almost just looked for Emma's toy and ignored the bag. But something told me to look closer. Women's intuition, mother's instinct, divine guidance, call it what you want. I listened to that voice, and because I did, we're all here today. My message to everyone is simple: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. If you see something suspicious, report it. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Don't talk yourself out of your concerns. You might be the only person positioned to prevent disaster. Be that person. Rachel added her perspective. In my 12 years of flying before Flight 638, I'd never faced anything like this. I'd handled medical emergencies, unruly passengers, mechanical issues, but never terrorism, never a bomb. My training prepared me, but Carmen's alert gave me the chance to use that training. We're a team, all of us, passengers and crew. We protect each other. That's the lesson of Flight 638. We're all in this together, watching out for each other, acting when we see danger. That's how we defeat terrorism, together. The military veteran who choked out David Sullivan and prevented him from detonating the bomb received the Citizens Medal for Valor from the Department of Homeland Security. At the ceremony, he was asked what had made him react so quickly. Training. I'm former Marine Corps. When I saw that guy with the phone, heard him threaten detonation, my training kicked in. Neutralize the threat immediately. Don't hesitate. I put him in a chokehold before I consciously decided to do it. Muscle memory. And I'm grateful my training was there when it was needed. His humility mirrored Rachel's and Carmen's ordinary people with training and instincts, who'd done what was necessary. 10 years after Flight 638, Emma Martinez was 16 and thriving. She'd become an advocate for aviation security awareness, speaking at schools and community events about the importance of vigilance. I dropped a toy when I was 6, she'd tell audiences. That's all I did. I was just being a kid. But my mom investigated what she found, trusted her instincts, reported her concerns. The flight attendant acted immediately. Passengers helped stop the bomber. Everyone did their part. That's the message: we all have a part to play in keeping each other safe. Your part might be as simple as noticing something wrong, but that simple act could save hundreds of lives. Carmen and Emma maintained a close friendship with Rachel Morrison over the years. They'd been bound by crisis, connected forever by the day they'd all almost died. They met annually on the anniversary of Flight 638, sometimes just the three of them, sometimes with other passengers and crew. They'd share memories, support each other through the trauma that never fully left any of them, and celebrate the gift of continued life. We're survivors, Rachel would say. We survived together, and we'll carry each other for the rest of our lives. Aaron included Flight 638 in his book about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, devoting an entire chapter to the incident. He titled it, "The Dropped Toy," and focused on the chain of small events that prevented catastrophe. Emma dropped a toy. Carmen investigated a backpack. Rachel stayed calm and alert. Passengers subdued a terrorist. Every link in this chain mattered. Remove any one link, and 183 people die. But the chain held. Everyone did their part. That's the miracle of Flight 638. Not divine intervention necessarily, but human beings doing the right thing at the right moment. That's how we survive. That's how we defeat evil. One small right action at a time, building into salvation. David Sullivan remained in federal prison, a footnote in terrorism history. His planned attack had failed completely, stopped by a child's accident and a community's response. His name would be forgotten, while Emma Martinez, Carmen Martinez, Rachel Morrison, and the passengers of Flight 638 would be remembered for showing how awareness and action defeat terror. That was justice, not the legal sentence imposed on Sullivan, though that mattered, but the deeper justice of ordinary people triumphing over evil through simple vigilance and courage. 15 years after the incident, Emma was in college, studying emergency management and crisis response. She planned to work for the Department of Homeland Security, helping prevent attacks like the one she'd unwittingly helped stop as a child. That day changed the entire direction of my life, Emma told Aaron in a final interview. I could have been traumatized, terrified of flying, broken by what almost happened, but instead, it gave me purpose. I want to protect people, the way my mother protected me, the way Rachel protected everyone. I want to be the person who prevents the next Emma from having to drop a toy and accidentally find a bomb. I want to catch the terrorists before they get on planes. That's my calling, born from the scariest day of my life. Carmen, now in her 40s, reflected on the incident with a perspective only time could provide. I relive it sometimes, reaching under that seat, touching the backpack, seeing the wires, the terror of realizing what it was, the decision to report it despite not being absolutely certain. What if I'd been wrong? What if it was nothing, and I'd caused a panic? But I reported it anyway because the risk of being wrong was acceptable compared to the risk of staying silent if I was right. That's the lesson I try to teach everyone. Better to report and be wrong than stay silent and be dead. Rachel Morrison retired from flying at age 55, ready for a quieter life, but she volunteered with aviation security training programs, teaching new flight attendants about threat recognition and emergency response. Flight 638 was my defining moment professionally, she'd tell trainees. Everything I'd trained for, all the scenarios we'd practiced, became real, and I survived it because I trusted my training and stayed calm. You will face emergencies in your careers. Maybe not bombs, but medical crises, unruly passengers, equipment failures. Trust your training. Stay calm. Act decisively. That's how you bring everyone home safely. The little plastic toy that Emma had dropped was preserved by the FBI as evidence in David Sullivan's trial, then returned to the Martinez family after his conviction. Carmen kept it in a shadow box with a plaque, the toy that saved 183 lives, Flight 638. Sometimes the smallest things have the biggest impact. Emma looked at it often growing up, reminded that her childhood accident had mattered enormously, that even small, seemingly insignificant moments could change everything. Aaron's final reflection on Flight 638, written 15 years after the incident, captured what he'd learned from following the story. A 6-year-old dropped a toy. That's where this story begins and ends. From that simple childhood accident came the discovery of a bomb, the prevention of mass murder, changes to aviation security, and lessons about vigilance that continue saving lives 15 years later. Emma Martinez didn't mean to be a hero. She was just clumsy. But God, fate, chance, whatever you believe in used her clumsiness for good. Combined with her mother's awareness and the flight crew's professionalism, that dropped toy became salvation for 103 people. Never underestimate the small moments. Never dismiss the minor accidents. Never ignore the instincts that tell you something's wrong. Because sometimes the smallest thing, a dropped toy, a curious mother, an alert flight attendant, stands between normal life and catastrophic death. That's the gift of Flight 638, the reminder that we're all part of each other's survival. We all matter. Even clumsy 6-year-olds dropping toys. Especially them.